So Steve Wesley, a guy who manages about $1 billion and a former board member for Tesla, just dropped a few massive bombshells about Tesla's future. Let's watch and then let's react.
First, Ford and GM are both struggling to sell just 100,000 units in 2023 here. And that's compared to 2 million units for Tesla. So they're supposed to be catching up here. They're at less than 5%. So if those numbers drop down, that hurts. Second, Tesla's triggering a global price war. And I think we've seen it. Tesla's had 6 cost reductions this year alone. General Motors, Volkswagen, Ford, they're all trying to keep up. But remember the big picture. Not only is Tesla selling a lot more electric vehicles, but net margins are 12.9%. Compare that with 6% at GM, 4% at Volkswagen, 2.4% at Ford. If you're raising rates or costs at those companies, that's coming at just the wrong time. Now, the good news here is for consumers. Tesla sees an advantage. They're seizing it. The Chinese, will come to that, BYD are doing the exact same thing, driving costs down. EVs are going to be cheaper than ever before, but it's going to put the squeeze on automakers with high cost structures. So GM and Ford need to be careful. Yeah. This will be an interesting one to watch. Again, we want to see American workers getting paid more, but in industries that are struggling to be competitive and break even, and make no mistake, the entire global auto industry is going all electric. It's a race to see who can get quality EVs to the market most quickly at a good price. Tesla's done that a little better than anyone heretofore. Chinese are putting pressure on. So the American automakers are going to need to get more efficient more quickly. I just went through the gross margin numbers or the net margin numbers, but when Tesla is at 12.9% in gross margins, GM, Ford lagging quite a bit, something's got to give here. So I'm hoping that with the new battery production and so on, other efficiencies, GM and Ford can bring margins up and be competitive, but they're going to have to kick into a higher gear sooner rather than later. And the Chinese are coming.
Does Tesla make batteries? Yes or no? Have they made a battery?
What they do is they partner with the CATLs, the Panasonics, and the LG Chems of the world. But increasingly, they've taken battery production in-house. They have a cost advantage over virtually everybody else except for the Chinese. And that is part of the reason they have such high gross margins, which is great news. Second, they're the masters at selling OTA, or over-the-air software services. Okay. That's great. And third, they lead the world in robotization. So that's what's giving them the price edge. The Americans are going to have to keep up. The Chinese are coming quickly. This market's, it is fascinating. There's going to be a restructuring of the global auto market like we've never seen before. Right now, here are the numbers. Tesla has 21.7% of global EV market share. And again, EVs are what matters. Every auto company in the world is going all electric. BYD, a fairly close second at 16.2%. There's a huge drop to the other Chinese companies in Volkswagen. So you've got to get EV production up and going. You've got to do it profitably. And BYD is really right on Tesla's heels. They make a good car, low cost. Chinese government subsidizing batteries. That's going to be the real smackdown. But there's a lot of concern about whether people want to drive a Chinese car, not just because they're a competitive country, but because cars are now filled with IoT devices. And do you want a car that could be, or frankly is, listening to you? I think a lot of people are going to think twice on that one.
So the first thing he was talking about is the fact that Tesla is actually outselling Ford and GM as far as electric vehicle sales, about 22x. So Ford and GM versus Tesla. Tesla is selling 20 times more electric vehicles than both these companies combined. So that's number one. Number two, he actually said something very smart, is that the price wars that Tesla is engaged in right now are only killing Ford, GM, and the rest of them, VW. Because look, at the end of the day, Tesla has significantly higher margin, as he pointed out correctly, significantly higher margin. So when Tesla goes into these price wars, it's essentially the same example of, let's say you open up a little hot dog stand and then Walmart decides they want to, take you out of business. So they set up a hot dog stand right next to you and they sell a soda and a hot dog for like 10 cents a pop just to drive you out of business, because they can afford to take a loss on this little stand just to drive you out of business. This is essentially what Tesla is doing to the rest of the industry. They can afford to take a loss with their margin. Not a problem at all. He did mention that BYD, the Chinese company, is the real only competitor to Tesla It's not Ford and GM. I wholeheartedly agree, but I have some issues with BYD, which I will mention in a second right now. Look, at the end of the day, BYD is probably the closest thing to a Tesla competitor we have in the market right now. It's definitely not Toyota. Toyota dropped the ball completely on EVs. VW had a chance, but they decided to terminate the only guy who had the vision to do so, which was Herbert Diess, their former CEO. Ford and GM is a train wreck, as we're seeing right now with the UAW putting the final nail in their coffin. There's not really a lot of competition out there, except perhaps the Koreans, Hyundai, etc. But their scale is just too small. At the end of the day, it's Tesla and BYD right now. But here's the crazy part. BYD, beyond the geopolitical risks of being a Chinese company, which in itself are quite significant, as we learned from Alibaba and Jack Ma's story, the whole thing, the Taiwan uncertainties, etc., etc. Not to mention the China economic situation, which is in serious dire straits. Beyond that fact, BYD is not playing the same market that Tesla is playing. BYD are not trying to develop any sort of full self-driving autonomy, nothing. Their software level is very, very limited. They're only attacking the cheap, affordable car market. That's what they're going for. Their software, their self-driving, the driver assist features, there's always going to be 3-4 levels below Tesla. So they're going for that market segment that Tesla is really not attacking right now. When Tesla drops the Model 2, whatever it's going to be called, a $25,000 car, which won't have the same features, then we will see the actual competition with BYD. Right now, BYD is playing this cheap category with no competition, and it's killing it for sure. The second thing you mentioned is that Elon is right on the fact that the UAW is killing whatever's left in Ford and GM. I wholeheartedly agree here as well. Obviously, Ford and GM cannot afford any more wage costs. They're basically scraping by as it is. Their cost structure is absolutely abysmal. They're literally losing money on every EV they're selling right now, and EVs is where they want to get to. But now, when your employees are asking to work one day less and get paid 30-40% more, I mean, there's no way you can do it sustainably. Obviously, the UAW understands these numbers, and what they're driving for is a bailout. So the UAW understands that what they're asking for is not affordable, not sustainable, but they know at the end of the day, because the president and the government, they love the UAW so much, they're going to bail out Ford and GM politically, and they will get paid on the backs of the American taxpayers. The problem is that this is not sustainable. This communist way of thinking is not sustainable, because you're essentially you're kind of making Ford and GM non-competitive on the global stage. I mean, there's only so many times you can bail them out. Meantime, the rest of the world is going to bypass these companies. So that's not a good solution if you want to try and keep Ford and GM globally competitive. Bailouts is some of the most commonest things you can think about. Look, at the end of the day, I understand people need to get paid, but if it doesn't make sense, then don't do it. If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, then it means don't do it. Very, very simple. Now, he said that Ford and GM should bring up margins, and he's hoping they can do it. How? I can't see. I mean, they can't figure out a way to make EVs even at cost at this point. How they're going to bring down costs, I don't understand, especially with what seems to be an imminent raise across the board for wages, which is going to be absolutely insane. Now, he was asked about the battery, and I think the question was a little bit misleading, and I'll explain. Look, she said, well, does Tesla actually make their own batteries? And of course, we can talk about the 4680, but look, at the end of the day, there's a very clear definition of what making your own battery means. Obviously, Tesla makes its own 4680s. The thing is, like, if I make my own, if I design my own, if I control my own battery, I have my own technology in it, but I send it to contract manufacturing at a certain plant, that's me manufacturing. I don't have to physically build the battery myself if it's my design and I'm just using a contractor to produce the actual hardware. So that's what we're talking about here. And probably at the end of the day, within a few years, Tesla will even do that completely 100% on grounds. So yes, Tesla makes their own batteries. That should not even be a question. A very ill-informed question by the host here. I'm quite surprised that this even came up. Now, at the end of the day, there was a question here about, what happens with the entire EV industry, who wins, who loses. And he mentions, look, Tesla has 20% of the global market, BYD has 16%, and there's a huge drop-off. There's nobody there. Who's going to be number 3? God knows. It's wide open. And it's wide open because of the malpractice of the rest of the industry, pretty much. So is it going to be Toyota, VW? Who knows at this point? They're so lagging behind. Ford and GM is probably at the bottom of the barrel here, unfortunately. But here's the thing. As I mentioned earlier, BYD is number 2, but Tesla isn't competing with BYD right now on the low $25,000 segment. BYD isn't really even chasing full self-driving at all. which will be the next big kind of S-curve for the next big auto manufacturer. Plus, as I mentioned, China is a train wreck, so a Chinese company, God forbid. So I'm not really confident on BYD for those reasons. If BYD can beat Tesla when Tesla actually plays in that segment, it's going to be very interesting to see. I don't think they can. He also talked about the fact that Tesla is currently valued at a reasonable rate because at the end of the day, it's a tech company. It's a tech company. It's an energy company. It's growing at a 40% rate. And it's very cheap multiples if you consider it not a car company. If you look at it, a car company, yes, it's expensive, but that's again another misunderstanding of the people who work on these talking head shows. So yes, he also talked about the fact that Tesla has a huge manufacturing advantage. It takes them 1/3 of the time of what it takes the rest of the industry to assemble a car, 10 hours versus about 30 hours for the rest of the industry. How can you catch somebody who's better at you at producing cars, who's better at you at generating the next big thing, which is FSD? Tesla is currently sitting at almost 200 million miles and accumulating about 1 million miles a day. Nobody comes close to that. They will solve FSD, autonomy driving, first before everybody else. Their manufacturing is the best. It's getting better at the fastest pace among all others. The battery technology is the best. The 4680 is absolutely insane. Their supercharging network is unrivaled. They also have insurance business. They obviously they're developing general AI. They're talking about massive global expansions with more factories around the world, and they have Elon Musk, the secret weapon, which none of the other companies actually have. And look, at the end of the day, who's going to beat Tesla? I don't know even who's going to be number 2. So this race is over. He's 100% right. We're currently at this trying to figure out who's going to be number 2 and 3 because the gap from number 1 is so massive, and some people still refuse to understand that, and that's fine. Now, if you want to learn more about how to invest correctly, how to invest in companies that are quite hyped like Tesla, and how to invest responsibly and build out your portfolio over the long time through dollar cost averaging, we have a few spots remaining for our academy. Head on over to patreon.com/Tom Nash. 30-day money back guarantee. Try it out for 30 days. Try out our lessons. We already have about 15 hours of lessons of how to build your DCF, how to model, how to evaluate companies. Check it out. Tell me what you think. If you like it, if you don't like it. If there's any course members here in the video, comment below. Tell us your experience, good or bad. Would love to hear it. And I'm going to put out this video right here if you haven't seen it yet on the side. This is a video of Ron Barron absolutely annihilating the CNBC panel about Tesla's future. Must watch. I'll see you in the next video.